How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Aleph, Daf 41 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, today we wrap up the second parak of Masechta Chullin. It's a very awesome daf. There are three sections. The first one, we discuss a concept that I believe came up just a touch yesterday, called Ein Adam Oser Davar she'einu Shelo. We're going to see Rav Nachman, Rav Yitzchok, Rav Amram, that they say in unison that a person cannot make forbidden somebody else's stuff. Okay, a person can't. We talked yesterday, for example, about slaughtering somebody else's animal for avodah zarah. So we are going to discuss that sugya today of Ein Adam Oser Davar she'einu Shelo, and we will test it through different scenarios, and then we will arrive at the second to last Mishnah of the second parak of Masechta Chullin, where we will discuss places you cannot slaughter into. What in the world does that mean? It means, for example, you can't slaughter and let the blood drain into the river or into a bucket, or we'll see different scenarios like that, into a hole in the ground. So we'll discuss that, and then the accompanying Gemara, and finally we will learn the final Mishnah in the second parak of Masechta Chullin, where we will discuss slaughtering with the intention of korbanos. Very interesting. What if a person slaughters an animal and he says, I'm slaughtering it as a korban chatas? Now, he's not actually offering a korban chatas. He doesn't even need to bring a korban chatas. And we'll kind of discuss that. I mean, he's not actually slaughtering it as a korban chatas, but he's saying that he is, and the question is it too close for comfort? Is it as though it's not actually shchutei chutz, but by saying that I'm slaughtering this as a chatos or as a shlomim, is that kind of too similar to shchutei chutz? Anyways, we will discuss that as well. So this is what we have today on Daf Mem Aleph, the final daf of the second parak of Masechta Chullin. Friends, we begin on Daf Mem Amid Beis, about 5 lines, 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Mem Amid Beis of Nachman, Rav Amram, Rav Yitzchok Amrei. Ein Adam Oser Davar she'einu Shelo. There you go. Rav Nachman, Rav Amram, Rav Yitzchok, they say together that a person cannot make aser that which isn't his. Double negative. A person can only make aser that which is his. Okay? If he doesn't own it, then he can't. It's not his. He can't make it forbidden. Can't make it aser meisvei. However, we have a question from the brisa that we were learning about yesterday. Hashoichet chatos b'Shabbos. A person on Shabbos slaughters a korban chatos b'chutz, and was outside of the azara. La'avodas kechavim, and it was with the intention of avodah zarah. Chayib shalosh chatos is chayib 3 korban chatases for chilul Shabbos, for slaughtering for avodah zarah, and for shchutei chutz. Of course, this was all by accident, which is why he's chayib korban chatases for each of these shogegs. If it was on purpose, it would be a different story. That would be chilul Shabbos b'mezid, kares, maybe even skila if there's warning. Anyways. And as we said yesterday, b'chatas ha'of, that we're talking about specifically a korban chatas ha'of, which you only need to slice to one of the simanim, uv'chatzi kone pagum, and it's talking about when the trachea was already halfway broken, and you only needed to do the slightest amount of shchita in order to make it a proper shchita, and that was out of concern that, you see, in terms of shechting an animal, or in this case a bird, for avodah zarah, once you slice once you make even the smallest cut, it would already be considered a maisa, and it would already be aser as a bird that was slaughtered for avodah zarah. It would have been already aser because it was a maisa that was for avodah zarah. Now, if it's already aser because of avodah zarah, then it's memela possible for a korban. If it's possible for a korban, how would you be chayav for shchutei chutz? So we said, well, the only way we can kind of resolve all these things together, that you'd be chayav for chilul Shabbos, for avodah zarah, and for shchutei chutz, is in this scenario where we have a chatas ha'of, and which you only need to slice through one of the simanim, and the trachea was already halfway broken, and you just needed to do the slightest bit of a cut. And once you do the slightest bit, it will already be avodah zarah, but simultaneously it will also be shchutei chutz because you're slicing it now more than halfway, and it will be chil Shabbos, which is why you'll be chayiv for all three. So taima dechatas aof hu. So the reason why this scenario works is because it's a chatas ha'of, as I just explained, where there's only one siman, and because it's already broken halfway, the trachea is broken halfway, just the slightest amount of a cut would make you simultaneously chayiv for all of these things. Aval zevach lo, but not if we're talking about a korban chatas, an animal, right? We said dafka a chatas ha'of, but not a chatas of a animal, right? If it's like a sheep or a goat, a kispa v'sira, because there you would have to, for a regular korban chatas, you'd have to slice through both of the simanim. The thing is that once you start slicing through one, it's already going to be also for avodah zarah. How could it be chayiv for shchutei chutz? So a dafka has to be the bird, since we have to be concerned about the smallest slice making the bird, or if we were talking about an animal, then an animal, aser. But the thing is, if what Rav Nachman et al., I think that's like an academic way of saying Rav Nachman and everybody with him, like Rav Amram and Rav Yitzchak, if Rav Nachman et al. Are saying that ein adam Oser Davar Shelo, well, we had said yesterday that we're dafka talking about a korban chatas because the korban chatas is considered like it's not yours, right? Since the emurim go on the mizbeach, the meat goes to the kohanim, and the owner doesn't get anything. And therefore, so we said dafka a korban chatas, we dafka use this brayso that's talking about a korban chatas as a valid example for what we were talking about yesterday. Rav Huna was talking about shechting your friend's animal for avodah zarah, and we also had Ula who was talking about that. So somebody else's animal. So the chatas was the relevant example because the korban chatas is not yours. It's the kohanim's, it's Hashem's, the kohanim's. It's not yours. Everyone else gets, but not you. And now, if you're saying now ein adam oser davar she'eino shelo, then what are we concerned about? Right, the whole thing over the whole reason why we said it, dafka needs to be a chatas ha'of, where the trach is already halfway broken, because that way, when you do the slightest cut, simultaneously the bird will be asur for avodah because it's avodah zarah, but also it will be shchutei chutz because you slice more than half. The thing is, right? So we're the reason why we couldn't say chatas behema, the reason why we had to say chatas off, and not just chatas off, but also where the kana is already halfway broken, was out of this concern that once you start slicing, the bird's going to become asur, or the animal's going to become asur. But if what Rav Nachman et al. Is saying, which is that, well, you can't make asur something that doesn't belong to you. Well, the chatas was an example of something that doesn't belong to you. So if that's the case, well then, cutting through the neck of either the bird or the animal should not be making it asur. You'll still be chayiv for avodah, for worshiping avodah zarah. So you still have to bring a korban chatas for that, but it won't make the animal asur. And if it doesn't make the animal asur, that makes things a lot easier. We don't have to be talking about specifically a chatas off where the trachea was already halfway broken. I'm concerned that when he makes the slightest cut, it already becomes asur. No, it doesn't. If what Rav Nachman et al. Is saying that you can't make something, let's keep it positive. You can only make something asur if it's yours. This isn't yours, so you can't make it asur. In which case, even use a chatas behema. That should be fine as well, because as you're slicing through the neck, it's not becoming asur because of avodah zarah. And then when you finish slicing through the neck, it'll be shchutei chutz, and you'll be chayiv for Shabbos, for avodah zarah, and for shchutei chutz. So again, ve'i ein adam oser davar she'eino shelo. If a person can't make asur that which isn't his, i.e., you can only make asur that which is yours. Now this chatas isn't yours. You don't get any of it. So my area chatas off. Why does it have to be specifically a chatas off? And not only that, but where the trachea is already halfway broken. Afilu chatas behema nami. You can even use a chatas behema, since it won't be since it won't be asur because of avodah zarah. So just wait till the end of the shechita. You'll be chayiv for shchutei chutz. You'll be chayiv for avodah zarah because even though the animal's not Oser, but you just worshipped the Avodah Zarah, and you'll be Chai for Chilul Shabbos. So Gemara says, well, I'll tell you why. I will tell you why in this case we are concerned. I'll tell you why by the case of this Korban Chatas with the Shabbos and the Avodah Zarah and the Shchutei Chutz, why we are concerned about it becoming Oser with the slightest slice, because Kem dekanyale lichapara kedide damya. Well, I can make the argument that since he is the one getting the kapara for it, he bought this animal or this bird in order to get kapara, so it could be considered like it's his, and because it would be considered like it's his, so that explains why we are concerned, if it's his, that it would become Usr right away, and that is why we need to have a scenario where when there's the slightest cut, the bird will be Usr for Avodah Zarah, but also Chayav for Shchutei Chutz. Again, because since we're talking about a Korban Chatas where even though he doesn't get to eat any of it, he does receive kapara for it, so it can be considered like it's his, and that is why we are concerned about it becoming Oser for Avodah Zarah. Toshma, come in here. Beis ochazin bisakin. We had said in our Mishnah that if you have two people holding on to the shchita knife, one's holding on to the handle, one's holding on to the blade. Sheesh. I'd rather be holding on to the handle, I think. Vishochatin, and they start slicing. Echad l'shum, echad mikol elu. One of the two shaykhtin was thinking about the mountains, the hills, the rivers, etc. Ve'echad l'shum davar kosher. And the other one was thinking about kosher stuff, like dinner. Shchita so psula. So the Mishnah had said that the shchita is psula. Now we're assuming that this animal does not belong to the shaykhid who is thinking about the mountains and the hills. And still we're saying that the animal is pasul. So apparently, a person can make Usr something that isn't his. And for the Gemara, actually, the Mishnah is talking about where the shaykhid who's thinking about the mountains and the hills is actually a part owner of this animal, and that is why that's why he could make it Usr. If it wasn't his animal, Rav Nachman would argue he would be unable to make it Usr. Tashma, come here. I'm a tameh. Right? If somebody touches, if a tameh person touches truma and makes it tameh, or if somebody adds some truma into chullin, and now there's truma in the chullin, and it's called meduma, which is a mixture of chullin and truma, which, unless there's 200 parts of chullin to one part of truma, unless there's that much of a ratio, we'd have to treat it like truma. And if Reuven libates Shimon's wine for Avodah Zarah, in all of those cases, b'shogeg potter, if it was an accident, so then Reuven, who's the one who did these things, he's the one who made the truma tameh, he's the one who mixed the truma into the chulin, he's the one who poured the wine, right? Reuven. If it was by accident potter, he doesn't need to pay Shimon back. B'mezid chai, but if it was b'mezid, if it was intentional, so then he's going to be chayiv to pay Shimon for the loss, for Shimon's loss. So now we see that Reuven is able to make Shimon's wine Oser by libating it for Avodah Zarah. Reuven makes Shimon's wine Oser. So Achanami Disle Shutfis Begava. Well, here also it's talking about where Reuven was also a partner in that wine, and therefore it was also Reuven's wine, which explains why he could make it Asur. Kitanoi. Now says the Gemara that this concept of Ein Adam Oser Davar She'enu Shelo, that a person cannot make Oser that which is not his, a person can only make Oser that which is his. Kitanoi, it's like a machlokes tanoim oived kechavim shenizach yenoi shel Yisrael, in oived kechavim who libated the wine of a yid shaloi b'fnei avodas kechavim, and it was not in front of Avodah Zarah. Osro, nonetheless, even though it was not in front of the Getchke, nonetheless, the Ovid Kuchavim, by pouring the wine of the Yid, he makes it Oser. So we see that the Ovid Kuchavim is making the wine of a Yid Oser, even though it's the Yid's wine, not the Ovid Kuchavim's wine. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Matirin also. However, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava say that the wine is okay. They say that the wine is okay. Also, okay, mipnei shnei dvarim, for two reasons. Echad shemenaschin yayin ela b'fnei avodas kuchavim. Reason number one, because according to them, the wine must be libated in front of the getchke, and here it was not in front of the getchke, and therefore there's no issue of yenesech. But also, ve'echad sheyachol lomar lo kol heimonach sheteoser yeni loonsi. And secondly, they say to him, you can't do that. This isn't your wine. You can't ruin our wine. So we want to say that it's a machlokes, that this concept of ein adam oser davar she'eino shelo is machlokes. According to the Tanna Kama, you can do it. According to the Tanna Kama, you have the Ovid Kuchavim, who is making Oser the wine of a Yid that doesn't belong to him. So according to Tanna Kama, Oser Adam Davar She'eino Shelo, you can do it. According to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, you can't do it. The Yid could say, hey, you can't make my wine Oser. Now, Rav Nachman, Rav Amam, Rav Yitzchak, however, they are going to explain that even the Tanna Kama would agree with them, that everyone agrees. Ein adam oser davar she'eino shelo. Amri, they will say, afilu man da'amar adam oser davar she'eino shelo, even according to the Tanna Kama, who says adam oser davar she'eino shelo, right? That according to the Tanna Kama, the Ovid Kuchavim made the wine of the Yid Oser. But Animile, Kusi, there's different gears that says Goy, a non-Jew. So a non-Jew, right, an Ovid Kuchavim, can make the wine of a Yid Oser, sure. Avol Yisrael, L'tza'uri kamechaven, but a Yid would not make the wine of another Yid Oser. We would assume that he's just being a shmendrik. He's just being a shmendrik, he's just being annoying, but he's not going to actually make it Oser. Right, as Rashi says, the Tza'uri Chaber Ovid, the Ein Daito Avodas Kuchavim. We assume that Ruvain, when libating Shimon's wine, his intention is not for Avodah Zarah, he's just trying to be a shmendrik. So, Rav Yitzchak Rav Nachman et al. Say that, look, in terms of an Ovid Kuchavim libating the wine of a Yid, yes, an Ovid Kuchavim can make the Yid's wine Osher, but a Ruvain libating Shimon's wine, he would not make it Osher. Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eino Shelo. Now, we are going to review again. The Gemara is now going to go over two scenarios that it had mentioned earlier. Tashma Komenir, Beis Ochazin Besakin, if you have two people holding on to a knife, again, we had this earlier today, V'shaychatin, and they are slaughtering in tandem. Echad Shum, Echad Mikol Elu, one of them had in mind the mountains and the hills, etc. Ve'echad Shum, Davar Kasher, and the other one was thinking about dinner. Shchitaso Psula, we said that the shchita is pasul. Now, earlier we had said, why is the shchita pasul? Because he's actually a partner in the animal. But we say now that we've seen that you could make it aser, right? An Ovid Kuchavim can make aser something of a Yid. So Achav Ma'askinon B'Yisrael Mumar. Here we are talking about a Yid who's a Mumar, a Yid who does Avodah Zarah, a Yid who is therefore treated like an Ovid Kuchavim. We're talking about a Yid who does Averis, does Avodah Zarah, and therefore when he says that he's shechting with the intention of the mountains and the hills, we take him seriously. Now, there's an interesting machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says that we could have answered like we answered earlier, that that the shaychet who's thinking about the mountains and the hills makes it also because he's a partner in the animal. However, since we mentioned just now that there was also an option that an Ovid Kuchavim can make something of a Yid also, so we say, well, it's talking about a Yid who's a Mumer, and we treat him like an Ovid Kuchavim, and that's why he can make it Oser. Tosfos says that the Gemara wouldn't just do that. The Gemara wouldn't just say, oh, well, let's just bring up this brisa again and now give a different answer. Rather, Tosfos says that actually now that we just learned that, yeah, an Ovid Kuchavim can make that which belongs to a Yid Oser. However, a Yid can't make that which belongs to another Yid Oser because he's just going to be, right, he's just playing around. He wasn't actually being serious. So therefore, if that's the case, that we'll say that he's just being serious. So the fact that he's a partner won't actually mess things up. And therefore, Tosfos says that's why we had to bring it up again, because wait, he's just messing around with his friend. He's not actually making it Oser. Oh, but we're talking about a Mumer, and therefore because he's a Mumer, that is why he will treat him like an Ovid Kuchavim, and he's going to make it Oser. The Rambam, however, seems to learn, like Rashi learns, that it could be either one. The Rambam brings down that one person can make the other person, right, if he shechs it for the mountains and stuff, can make it Oser if either he's a partner or he's a Mumer or he was warned, as we're going to see here. So we see that he kind of learns like Rashi that it's both. Okay. Now, Toshma, come in here. Hamitame v'amidamea v'amenasech. We had said that somebody who, right, if Reuven makes Shimon's truma tame, v'amidamea, or mixes truma into chulin, v'amenasech, or Reuven libates Shimon's wine for avodah zarah, b'shogeg, by accident, potter, b'mezid, if it was on purpose chayv, he has to pay back Shimon. So we see that Reuven can make Shimon's wine Oser, so Achanami here as well, but Yisrael Mumer, we are talking about a Yid who is a Mumar, who does Averis, and we have to assume that he really was libating for Avodah Zarah and not just being a Shmendrik. Amar le, Rav Achabre, to Rav Ashi, Hisrubo, V'kibel Olav Asra, my. What happens if this is a person who doesn't have any previous offenses, but this is not a known Mumar, this is not a person who we know to be a person who does Avodah Zarah, but he's about to do Avodah Zarah, and he's about to libate wine for Avodah Zarah, and we say, hey, right, so Reuven is about to libate Shimon's wine for Avodah Zarah, and we say, wait, Reuven, don't do that, it's Avodah, right? They warn him, they say, it's Avodah Zarah, it's a Chiyuv Misa, whatever, and he says, yeah, I know, I'm going to do it anyways. So now what? Do we treat him like a Mumer to say that he's going to make Shimon's wine Aser? So Amarle, so Rav Ashi responds, Hitir Atzmo Lemisa Ka'amar. What are you talking about? A person who just said, I'm going to do this Avera of Avodah Zarah, and I'm even willing to die for it. There's no greater Mumer than that. And yes, he will be considered a Mumer, and yes, he will make Shimon's wine Aser. And now we get to a new Mishnah describing places you cannot slaughter into. Seems kind of abstract. Why don't we just jump into it and see for ourselves what this means. Says the Mishnah, we don't slaughter and let the blood bleed out into the river, nor into streams. Rashi says, says Rashi said, nobody should say that this individual is slaughtering to the officers, to the angel of the seas. Not into vessels, that nobody should say that he's going to then take the blood and do Zrikas Hadam for Avodah Zarah. So not into vessels. But you can slaughter if you have like a furrow that's filled with water, you can slaughter into that. The Gemara is going to explain why. Uvasfina al gabi kelim, if you're on a boat and you don't want the boat to get all bloody, so you can, I think, like stand on some kind of vessels or something, and then I think the idea is that the blood would kind of drain onto the side of the boat maybe, and then from there into the river, into the whatever he's boating on. But I think the point is not, whatever, out of concern for, you don't want the boat to get all bloody, so you can stand on vessels and slaughter the animal, but I think maybe not directly into the water. I think maybe on the side of the boat. Ein shochten leguma kol ikr. You don't slaughter into holes in the ground because that's what the ovdei kuchavim do. Aval osa guma b'soch beso b'shvil sheikanis adam l'socha, but you can make a hole in your house so that the water will go into it. This is very technical stuff. The Gemara is going to ask, didn't we just literally say ein shochten leguma kol ikr? You can't slaughter into a hole in the ground at all, and then we just said you can make a hole in the ground in your house. So what's going on there? But don't do this in the market. Don't make any holes in the ground in the market and shecht and allow blood to go into it. Shelo. It says tzedokим, you can change it to mumin, minin, so as not to strengthen the hand of the kuchavim be'etzim. Okay, very technical stuff. Says the Gemara, ein shochten lo l'soch v'chulei. So he said not into rivers, not into the, right, what do we say? We said not into the rivers, not into vessel, but yes, into a furrow filled with water. So the question is why? How come we said that you're not allowed to slaughter into and let the blood bleed into the river? Because we don't want anybody to think that you're slaughtering to the officer, the angel of the sea. So shouldn't we have a similar concern if you're slaughtering into a furrow filled with water? Nami Ame, they'll say, he is slaughtering to his own reflection in the water. Says Rava, yeah, but we are talking about dirty, murky water where you can't actually see your reflection. But if you can see your reflection, it will be a problem. Says the Gemara, in shochten legumit, you can't slaughter into a hole in the ground. And then we said that you're allowed to make a hole in the ground in your house and slaughter into that. So frag the Gemara. But Omar, in shochten leguma klal, we said literally right before that you're not allowed to slaughter into holes in the ground. And now you're saying you're allowed to make a hole in the ground in your house. What's going on? So Rabbi says, Abai, reisha beguma shebeshuk. Says Abai, well, initially when when the Mishnah says you're not allowed to shecht into a hole in the ground, that's talking about in the market, and in the market it's not allowed. But Rava says to Abai, it says at the end of the Mishnah, uvashuk lo yaisik, and you can't make a hole and slaughter either into it or even next to it in the market. So michlal dereisha lav b'shuk askinan. Well, the fact that in the Sefer we talk about the market, so the reisha must not be talking about the market. So Elam Rava. Rather, says Rava, Hachi Ka'amar, this is how to understand the Mishnah. Ein shochten legume kol ikr. You can't slaughter directly into a hole, because that's what the ovdei kochavim do. But if somebody wants to keep his courtyard tidy, so what do? Right? You don't want blood all over your courtyard, and you can't slaughter into a hole in the ground. So also, what do? So osa malkum chutz leguma. Well, what you could do is you could next to the hole, v'shochet, you could slaughter next to the hole, v'dam shoses v'yor leguma, and have the blood not land directly into the hole, but next to the hole, and let it kind of slide down into the hole. Uvashukli yasakim, but don't do this in the market. Shelo yichakis etzat stokim, or the minim, so as not to give encouragement to the minim that you are doing something that seems to be like a pagan practice. Tani Kavase de Ravit. Hay mahalach basvina, if a person was traveling on a boat, ve'ein lo makom basvina l'shchot, and there's nowhere on the boat to shecht. So motzi yado chutz lasvina, you can stick your hand outside of the boat, v'shochet, and shecht, v'dam shoses v'yored al dofne asvina, and the blood will then bleed out onto the walls of the boat. And from there, it will, of course, land in the water, but that would be okay since it's indirect. You cannot shecht directly into a hole in the ground. If somebody wants to keep his chatzer tidy, also, what does he do? Also, he makes a place outside of the hole, and shechts v'dam shoses v'yor deguma, and the blood will then kind of trail into the hole and will kind of, from next to it will kind of will indirectly fall into the hole. But don't do this in the market, because the pasuk says of chukoseim lo seilechu, don't walk in the ways of the ovdei kuchavim. So avoid it. Since they shecht into holes, just avoid the whole thing. In the market, and if one in the market does make a hole like this, even though we said not to, we actually have to check. We have to get the yentas on his case to have a look and check. Maybe he himself is a min, so we'd have to look into him. And now we get up to the final Mishnah of today's daf and of the second parak of Masechta Chullin. Slaughtering with the intention of korbanot. Let's see, what does this mean? It says in the Mishnah, Hashaychid l'shem ola. So somebody is shechting an animal, and he says, I'm shechting it as an ola. He's not actually shechting an ola. This isn't actually shchutei chutz, but he says, I'm shechting as an ola. Okay. L'shem zvach. You know what? Maybe actually I was thinking, let's actually almost like read the Mishnah in some ways backwards. I want to start at the end of the Mishnah, actually. At the very last line of the Mishnah, it says, Zeh klal, this is the rule. Kol davar shenidar v'nidav, anything that it could be a neder or a nidava. Okay? So for example, a shlamim, an ola, a toda, any korban that you can just donate and pledge. So ashochet l'shmo oser. So you're not allowed to slaughter and say, I'm slaughtering it as a shlamim, for example. And actually, if you back up into the Mishnah about 4 lines, I'm like literally cutting up this Mishnah. We had seen, it says Reb Shimon machshir. Reb Shimon actually says that it is kosher. And Rashi says, why does he say that it's kosher? Lo chiesh l'maris ha'ayin, because he's not concerned about maris ha'ayin. So the point being, this is not actually shchutei chutz. But it's just weird. It's too close. I mean, you have a shlamim, which is a animal that somebody can just pledge to offer, and he's saying, I'm slaughtering this as a shlamim, even though he'd never designated that, right? It's not like he was actually makdish this animal to be a shlamim. It's not like he needed to bring a korban shlamim. He had pledged a korban shlamim. He had set aside this animal to be a korban shlamim, and now he's shechting it outside of the azar, so it's shchutei chutz. No, it's not that. He's just saying, I'm shechting it as a korban shlamim. And it's a strange thing to say. It's not actually shchutei chutz, but it kind of looks like it's like too close to shchutei chutz, and therefore we say it's a problem. Reb Shimon says it's okay because he's not concerned about maris ha'ayin. He says, look, at the end of the day, this is not actually a korban shlamim, and it's weird, but it's not actually anything. Okay, I'm like literally learning, explaining this Mishnah in parts, but let's go back to the end of the Mishnah. So zeh klal kol davar shenidar v'nidav ashochet l'shmo oser. So if it's a korban that you can actually pledge and say, I'm going to bring a shlamim, I'm going to bring an ola, etc. So if you say that I'm slaughtering this animal as an ola, well, that would be aser. But if it's something that you can't actually pledge, you don't just pledge to bring a korban chatas, for example. So ashochet l'shmo kosher. So if somebody says, I'm slaughtering this animal as a korban chatas, and he doesn't need to bring a korban chatas, so that's okay, because it's still kind of weird, but nobody's going to actually think that, like, oh wow, is he actually like slaughtering a korban chatas? Is this shchutei chutz? Because since you can't just randomly say on a whim, I'm going to bring a korban chatas, so it's not something that we're concerned about. Now that we have learned different parts of the Mishnah, let's start from the beginning. Okay, ashaycha l'shem ola. So somebody who's shechts and he says, I'm shechting as an ola, l'shem zvachim, which is shlamim, right? As a shlamim. Now these next two are kind of random. The Gemara is going to explain why these are on the list of things that you're not allowed to shecht for. L'shem asham talui. For an asham talui, I think we're going to learn. Have we learned about asham? Maybe it comes up from time to time. I think in Kresus there's going to be we're going to learn a bit about asham talui. But asham talui be'etzem is when you're not sure if you're chayiv to bring a korban chatas. For example, there were 2 pieces of fat in front of a person, and he ate one of them. Turns out one of them was actually chalev. We don't know which one he ate. Nobody knows which one he ate. He may have eaten chalev. He may have not eaten chalev. If he did eat chalev, he has to bring a korban chatas. If he didn't eat chalev, he doesn't have to bring anything. We simply don't know. So you bring an asham talui until we have more information. If we find out that he did eat chalev, he'll bring a korban chatas. Turns out he didn't eat chalev, so then he doesn't have to do anything further. Anyways, so if a person says, I'm slaughtering this animal as an asham talui, l'shem pesach, or as a korban pesach, l'shem toda, or as a korban toda, Shchita so psula, so the shchita is psula, as we read from the end of the Mishnah, that any korban that one can pledge, like an ola, like a shlamim, like a toda, so there will be psula. We're going to have to explain what the deal is with the Asham Tali in the Pesach. Reb Shimon Machshir, Reb Shimon says that there's no issue here, because as we saw from Rashi, he's not concerned about Maris Ayin over here, that anybody's going to get the wrong idea of, wait, is he actually designating and shechting a korban? Is it shchutei chutz? Reb Shimon is not concerned. Shnayim ba'ochzim b'sakin, if you have two people holding onto a knife, one at the handle, one at the tip, v'shochten, and they are slicing and slaughtering in tandem. Echad l'shum echad mikol elu, ve'echad l'shum davar kosher. What? L'shum davar kosher, yeah. One of them is slaughtering with the intention of a shlamim or an ola, whatever, and the other one is slaughtering with the intention of dinner. Shchita so psula, the shchita is psula. Hashochet l'shem chatas l'shem osham vadai, but if somebody slaughters and he says, I'm slaughtering as a chatas or as an osham, or l'shem bechor, l'shem meiser, l'shem tmura, these are things that you don't just on a whim shecht for, and therefore shchita so ksher. Ze'aklal, as we saw, this is the rule called over nidar v'nidav, any animal, any korban that can be pledged, hashochet l'shmo oser, if you shecht and say, I'm shechting for that, for an ola, for a shlamim, for a toda, oser. Mishe'eno nidar v'nidav, but if we're talking about a korban like a chatas or an osham that you don't just pledge, hashochet l'shmo kosher, if you say, I'm slaughtering as a chatas, so that is kosher. Says the Gemara, Ashochet l'shem ola, Asham Tali bar nidar v'nidav hu. Why is Asham Tali on the list of animals that if you say, I'm slaughtering this animal as an Asham Tali, we said it's possible. Do people really pledge Asham Taluis? I thought you have to accidentally eat chaylev or something. So Amr Rabbi Yechon, says Rabbi Yechon Ramani, Rabbi Eliezeri, actually, this is Lefi the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. This is a Mishnah Masechta Kreisus. That interestingly, Rabbi Eliezer says a person can actually bring a korban asham talui every single day. Because what's an asham talui brought for? A suffix karis, right? For example, maybe I ate chalev, maybe I didn't. I simply don't know. Well, says Rabbi Eliezer, look, every single day every single day we likely have done things that maybe there's a chiyuv karis for, maybe we did them, maybe we didn't. Right? What does Rashi say? I'm going to read you Rashi. Rashi says, Shebachol yom, every single day, hu omei b'safek chet. Every single day a person, I'm reading Rashi, is in a suffix, is uncertain. Maybe he sinned. Maybe he did something that there's a chiyuv karis associated with it. V'libo nokfo, and he's in his heart, he's wondering, wait, maybe I did something wrong. Shemachata, maybe he sinned. Umatzinu she'echshir akosov asham tali likarev v'le'achel, and we see that there is such a concept of an asham tali that you can offer it, you can eat it. Heicha de huchzak safek chet be'edim. When you have a safek chet with witnesses, for example, if there are witnesses who said who can testify that you ate one of the pieces of fat, and that it may have been chaleb. So you bring an asham tali. V'hai nami onan saide. We can all testify the chol yoma b'safek chet kai that every day people are in a scenario where maybe they did something that they have to bring a korban chatas for, and therefore says over the Ezer, a person can bring a korban asham tali every single day just in case. The Mishnah, interestingly, in Masechta Kreisus continues and says that they would call this the asham. They called it the asham hachosid, or the asham chasidim. I think they called it. That this was the korban asham of the chasidim. That the pious people would, who were yarei chet, they would bring these asham talus every day. And even further, the Mishnah mentions Bava ben Buta. Our friend Janine, I think relatively recently, in Sugya Sisters, I think referenced a Gemara. She quoted from the Yerushalmi. We had also learned it in Masechta Beya, Daf Chof, I believe, about a Gemara with Bava ben Buta. Anyways, Bava ben Buta every single day would offer an ashram tali. He was just convinced, right? They urged him, however, that on the day after Yom Kippur he shouldn't bring an ashram tali, because at least assume post Yom Kippur, the next day, you don't have to bring an ashram tali. Anyways, very interesting concept there about offering an ashram tali every single day. Pesach, what about Pesach? By Nidar, V'nidavu, how can you just pledge a korban Pesach? Zmana Kviyale, there's a specific time, the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon. How could you just, it's not the kind of thing you could just pledge whenever you want. Well, actually, kind of. Amr Boshaya, Shiny Pesach, V'afrashaso Kol Ashana Kula. Actually, you can, you can any time during the year set aside your animal for the korban Pesach. Now, you would offer it on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon, but anytime during the year, you can technically set aside your sheep or goat for the korban Pesach. And even so, Rashi points out, as we know, Pesach b'shar Yemos Hashana Karev Shlomim, that during the rest of the days of the year, a korban Pesach can be offered as a Shlomim. So therefore, if he says that I'm slaughtering it as a Pesach, we can think that maybe, I guess it would be weird if he says I'm slaughtering it as a Pesach, but really it's a Shlomim. But I guess Memela Pesach during the rest of the year is a Shlomim. Fine. Rabbi Yanai says, Rabbi Yanai, Loshanu Ela Tmimim, says Rabbi Yanai, now these concerns that we have by all of these animals that we said are puzzle, it's only if the animal is not like missing a leg or something, it doesn't have a mum. If it's healthy. But if it has a mum, well then we're not concerned about anybody seeing this and saying, hey, what's going on here? Why is he slaughtering a shlamim, whatever? So made the yediyah, everyone will know, oh, it's like missing a leg. Clearly, this has nothing to do with an actual korban. For Rabbi Yochanan says, even if there is a mum, certain types of mums, zimnin de rami le midi amuma v'lo yediyah. Depending on what kind of a mum it is, you can kind of hide it and people won't necessarily realize. So says Rabbi Yochanan, even if it has a mum, it's still going to be osur. We had said that if somebody slaughters as a korban, he says, I'm slaughtering this as a korban chatas, we said that is mutter. It's kosher. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan Shalom ela she'eino mechuyev chatas. This only, when we say it's permitted, it's if this is a person who has no reason to be bringing a korban chatas. So it's a person who doesn't need to be bringing a korban chatas, and he says, I'm slaughtering this animal as a korban chatas, and like, wait, but this person doesn't need to bring a korban chatas, and you can't just donate a korban chatas. So people are like, okay, he's not actually like slaughtering chatas or anything. There's a very interesting Rashi over here, basically explaining how would a random person who's seeing this person, you have a Reuven says, I'm going to slaughter this animal as a chatas. We say, well, if he doesn't need to bring a chatas, nobody's going to get the wrong idea. How do they know if he needs to bring a chatas or not? So says Rashi, 3 lines into the wide lines of Rashi, De'ahu kala isle. When a person needs to bring a chatas, people know that he needs to bring a chatas. Demisha bad liado dvar, because a person who has sinned and needs to bring a korban chatas b'shogeg, or he sinned by accident, eino mechape ala, he doesn't hide the fact kadeshi is bayish miskapelos, that he will have a little bit of embarrassment, a little bit of to feel a little bit self-conscious about it, and it will be part of his kapara. So therefore, very interestingly, apparently when people needed to bring a korban chatas, people would know about it. The person who needs to bring the chatas would not hide that fact. Anyways, so it says the Gemara, when we say that if he slaughters as a chatas, it's kosher, that's assuming that he doesn't need to bring a korban chatas. But if he actually needs to bring a korban chatas, then we should be concerned. Wait, well, what's he doing? Is he slaughtering it as his korban chatas? So lo ka'amar l'shem chatasi, but he didn't say for my chatas. He says a chatas. Amar babo ba'amar l'shem chatasi. He says babo. So it's talking about a scenario where he says I'm slaughtering it as my chatas. It would be if he has to bring a korban chatas and says I'm slaughtering it as my chatas, then that would be possible. L'shem temura. If he says I'm slaughtering this animal as a temura. Now what's a temura? We're gonna have the privilege, the pleasure of learning Masechta Temura. After Chullin, we learn Bechoros. After Bechoros, we learn Arochin. After Arochin, Temura. I think Temura is going to be a difficult Masechta. Tmura is a substitute korban, right? A person needs to bring, he says, I'm going to bring this animal as a shlamim, and then he says, you know what, I'm going to bring that animal as my shlamim instead, for example. So a tmura needs to be swapped out for an existing animal that's going to be offered as a korban. So if he just simply says, I'm slaughtering this animal as a tmura, what does that mean? So Rabbi Eliezer says, Lo shanu ella she'ein lo zevach b'soch beso. So when we say it's permitted, that's so long as he doesn't actually have an existing korban that he's going to be offering, and this is not. So what's this a tmura for? There is nothing it's a tmura for. But if he has, if he has to bring, let's say, a korban shlamim, and he's got an animal set aside for his korban shlamim, now he says, I'm slaughtering this as a tmura. Well, yeah, we do have to be concerned. Ema, I'll say, amure amir bey. He's actually making a tmura, and he's shechting it right here. Lo tmura zivri. He didn't say as a tmura for my korban. Amar babo ba'omer l'shem tmura zivri. So it's talking about a scenario where he says, I'm shechting it as a tmura for my korban that I've set aside. Ze'aklal. The Mishnah said this is the rule. Asuyimai. When we say that, this is the rule by nedarim, right? By a shlamim, by ola, etc. Right? Animals that you can offer a neder for. So we said it's oser. So we said this is the rule. Okay. Well, what's it coming to include? We already literally went through all the different possible korbanos. So la'asuye olas nazir, to include the korban ola of a nazir. That if a person says that I'm slaughtering this as a olas nazir, it's also going to be oser. I may have thought, lo nadar. I may have thought, well, maybe it's okay because this person isn't a nazir. So Kamash Milan ema nadar b'tzina. I will say no. We need to be concerned that maybe he quietly became a nazir and didn't tell anybody. Now, of course, stam nazir is a shloshim yom. It's 30 days. 30 days is nothing. We think of a nazir. He's got long hair. He looks like me times 2, maybe. So, or more. But lav dafka, by default, a person says, I'm going to be a nazir, it's a 30-day stint. So therefore, we might not actually be able to tell. I need a haircut. Every day I think about getting a haircut. But when am I going to do it? When am I going to get a haircut? It's already 6 at night. So I've been very behind. I'll tell you, friends, I'm actually a little bit under the weather. For some reason, earlier today, I just felt like really schwach. So I took an Advil, so I'm doing okay. But, the Gemara in Erevin says, if you're not feeling good, so learn. So I think it's helping. Hakoponim. So, I don't even remember why was I saying this? I need to get a haircut, but the days just fly by. When am I going to get a haircut? Hakoponim. So that's why I look like this. All right. I don't really mind. Just the fact that my mustache is like a little bit out of control. And I don't mind that much. Let's go weiter. Where are we? Fine. So it includes a olas nazir. Lo nidar. I'll say that he quietly became a nazir. Therefore, it's a problem if he says it's for his olas nazir. Now, something that you don't just pledge, that comes to include, and we'll say it's mutter, is to include olas yoledes. If a person shechs an animal as the ola of a yoledes. So you don't just pledge that, you actually have to have a baby. Okay, so if you have a person if you have a man who's saying, I'm starting this as an olas yoledes, so it's okay as long as he's not married, and why would it be an olas yoledes for anybody? So, aval, yeshlo isha, but if he is married, Amar, well then it actually becomes a problem. Amar, I'll say, the Shema who Osa is actually, is he slaughtering it for his wife? But he didn't say that it's for the Ola of my wife, he just said as a Yoledes. So, fine, so it's talking about where he says for the Ola of my wife, that would actually be Oser. I may have thought, we may have thought, maybe it should be okay, because if you actually had a baby, wouldn't people have known about it? Kamaj Malon, Amar, Afule Afil will say that no, maybe the Taka did have a baby, and there's a miscarriage and people don't know about it. And if he says it's for the Yoledes, right, we're going to learn about Masechta Nida, that at a certain point, even a miscarriage, there would be a korban yoledes, and therefore he could say it is for my wife. People just didn't know because there was a miscarriage, and therefore it would be asur. Rashi actually has a different gears over here. He gets rid of the Rabbi Elazar thing. He thinks it's a little bit weird that Kilu we're saying that a yoledes is mutter, and then we're saying, well, that's only if it's a man and he's not married, but if he's married, then it's actually asur. And come on, Rashi says actually no. So Rashi has different gears. So I'll just read it to you. It says, "Lasuye olas yoledes." So an olas yoledes is mutter. If he says I'm slaughtering, so the Rambam actually says it's talking about the woman, right? That if you have a woman who says that I'm slaughtering this animal as a yoledes, as an olas yoledes, it would be permitted. Ma'al I may have thought Amar yalude yolid. So I may have thought that, wait, maybe it's actually also because maybe there was a baby. So Kamash Milan de Im Isa de Olid Kala Isle. No, if there was a baby, we would know about it, and therefore, since we don't know about it, if he or she is slaughtering as a korban yoledes, it would be permitted. Friends, that was Daf Mem Aleph of Masechta Chullin. On Daf Mem Aleph, we completed the second parak of Masechta Chullin, which I forgot to say, Hadron Olach HaShoichet. We will come back to parak HaShoichet. We learned about Ein Adam Oser Davar Shelo. Very interesting sugya over there. We had the shita of Rav Nachman, Rav Amram, Rav Yitzchak. They said a person can only make asur that which is his. If it belongs to somebody else, he can't. Ultimately they managed to kind of defend that position. There were a few notable exceptions. A non-Jew can make for example, the wine of a Jew asur. Also a meshumad, a Jew who is a mumar, he does averus. So therefore, if he, for example, libates the wine for another yid for avodah zarah, we assume it is in fact for avodah zarah, and it's going to be asur in that case. Now, in the event where somebody is a partner, let's say you have two people shechting an animal and they're partners in the animal. So according to Rashi and the Rambam, they say that he can make that animal asur. Tosfos says that no, we have to assume that the partner is just trying to be a shmendrik and it's not actually asur. We then got to the second to last Mishnah of the second parak of Masechta Chullin, where we talked about places you cannot slaughter into. For example, you can't slaughter into the river or into a vessel or into a hole in the ground. We talked about into a furrow with water in it. Depends if you could see your reflection or not. When it came to the hole in the ground, we said you can't check directly into the hole in the ground, but you can, at least according to Rava's Shita, Rava had said that you can check next to a hole and let it kind of then flow into the hole. We brought a brisa to support that. And then we got to the final Mishnah of the second parak of Masechta Chullin, where we discussed slaughtering with the intention of korbanos, and the general rule is that if you're saying that I'm slaughtering this as something that can be offered as a neder or a nedava, like a ola shlamim toda, we even talked about a pesach and an asham tali, and we also talked about the olas nazir. And otherwise, if it's something that you can't offer as a neder and nedava, for example, korban chatas, korban asham vadai, we talked about a yoledes, so those would be mutar, because you're not going to be, if you're not just on a whim going to be offering those as korbanos. There's nothing to be concerned about. Friends, that was Daf Mem Aleph, Daf 41 of Masechta Chullin. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Cheers.